I'm going to go ahead and give a status report today. Our star, Mark Spiegler, is not with us today, who has been the chair of our organization, the Siesta Key Coalition, and he asked me to basically read some things that he has written along with some other members of our core group to give you an update. And I wanted to tell you today, and you'll be hearing more about it, I think, in the coming week. The basic heading is that we are calling for, as a coalition, what we would call a big picture approach. The impact of all of the hotels that we are seeing coming up before the county commission should be reviewed collectively, not separately. And the reason, I think, is very obvious in that the impacts are great. In each case, we might want to find what is going to make the difference, and together, how are we going to deal with all of this if we're not looking at how it affects the whole key from north to south? The coalition wants the county commission to take the initiative to study the collective adverse impact of all the pending hotels development projects on or near Siesta Key, rather than dealing with the precedent-setting applications one at a time. The request is motivated by the three projects, in particular the proposed 120-room hotel and parking garage that's on Old Stickney Point Road in the south, the 170-room proposed Siesta Key Village Hotel, and the 170-room development at the Siesta Key Beach Resort in the village. Given the approved 120-room hotel that's already planned at Siesta Promenade, collectively, these hotels will add about 580 rooms, with the prospect of an additional 1,000 plus transient guests spilling into the Siesta Key roads and beaches, especially during high season. The collective bigger picture approach should include a review of the 1999 Siesta Key Community Plan that formed the basis of the Siesta Key Overlay District. And there are many of us here that were part of that. I was very fortunate to speak with a couple of them recently that were actually on the commission and on the planning commission, and we will keep those people close to us as they give us advisement. That big picture, it does include the formation of the overlay district, like I said, in the Siesta future land use policies. And these were formed between private citizens. For those of you that are new to our area, this was a unique collaboration that was formed over about a 2.5-year period, and it included private citizens, the county planning staff, the county commissioners, the planning commission, and to be honest, the reason and the basis for it is even more relevant today than it was in 1999. Our appointed and elected representatives, we believe, have a responsibility, once they took seriously in the 1999 process, to understand the following implications and the legal precedents that the proposed developments would have on our barrier island. Number one is to allow developers to revise and customize the policies and regulations that are enacted in the comprehensive plan. That impacts the whole county. For their purposes, will set a legal precedent for the other 40+ acres of commercially zoned property on Siesta Key. The planning commissioners and the Board of County Commission have a legal obligation to evaluate every single request for special exceptions beyond the by right zoning limitations, based on whether they satisfy multiple standards that are specified in the Chapter 125, Article 5, Section 124.43 of the Uniform Development Code, which is all about the Siesta Key Overlay District. The two proposed village and the Stickney Point development plan are all requesting significant transient use and height special exceptions. Any reasonable review of their plans should clearly show that they fail many of the required standards. There's never been a comprehensive vehicular plan and pedestrian traffic study for the entirety of Siesta Key, north to south, especially in contemplating the impact of these big, multiple large-scale hotels together with the promenade just off the south end, mixer-use development. None of us imagined all of this, 3 years ago. and it was already worrisome then, as many of you know. The FDOT graded congested road segments near both of these proposed hotels as poor, either E or F, back in 1999. And one factor that led to the density intensity development restrictions in the future land use was this traffic problem. The roads since then, as you may know, have not been widened. They cannot be widened. They can be improved in terms of the surfacing and perhaps striping, but they are as they are. Now the decisions are going to be based on reviewing the limited traffic studies done by the developers themselves, and we wonder who those are. And do we need to have a consultant? That's a good question for us. The proposed Siesta Key hotel developers have not a logical answer so far to how their collective 1,000 plus transient guests would really get to the beaches practically or safely. For most of us that live here, it seems kind of a crazy question, except for when you try to get there yourself and realize what people are facing every day, especially very recently. Some of you may have experienced difficulty getting home or getting off the key that took more than 45 to 50 minutes on either direction last week. Both the Siesta Key Village Hotel and the Stickney Point Hotel are across from two of the Key's most busy intersections, and are also across from public beach access points that lead to privately owned beach areas. In other words, this is not part of the public beach park. That beach park has an address, and you know it where we have our beautiful new areas for parking. Those are not those areas. We need big ideas, not big buildings, and we need our Sarasota County representatives to listen to the overwhelming concerns that are of all of us that live here and call it home. We need the representatives to lead and bring solutions to the traffic and the beach challenges, not open floodgates to high-rise transient accommodations that will contribute to the challenge and actually put at risk what makes the Barrier Island such an attractive destination. All of us that have lived here a good long while know that our global awareness has brought a lot of people here, and they seem pretty happy with it, just like it is. Now, we have improvements, no doubt, but what we don't want to lose is what brings people here and makes them happy to come back again and eventually live here. The coalition is not anti-development, as most of you know, and we strongly favor economic growth in the Siesta Key area, but not at the cost of so many adverse consequences, or if it involves revising or circumventing all the existing protections that we have put into place, the protective policies, the regulations, and the codes that were specific to Siesta Key and apply in many cases to all the other unincorporated barrier islands, which would also be at risk. To read the Siesta Key Coalition mission statement, we hope you will go to our website and to look at the webpage that's on the Siesta Key Association link. You can go to that and look for the projects, and you can also send an email to siestakeycoalition@gmail.com. And last, this coming week will provide an opportunity for many of us to give comments, but more importantly than just comments, to ask a good question. Someone always said to me, you know, our job in life is not to always have the answers, but to have a very good question. So we're asking you all to think of one and to think of what's important to you. And you'll see on the site right now where you can go to sign up for that workshop next week. And log in, sign up to go. It starts at 6 o'clock on the 11th, next Monday night. And I think that's about what I have to say, unless other people have questions for me.
Catherine, I was going to ask people to use the participants to raise their hand so I could see who had their hand up. Okay, if anybody wants to talk, you can raise your hand. And it's under
raised, but my video won't work, so I got my hand raised. So whenever you want me.
All right, Michael, you're talking. Go for it.
Hey, Michael.
Hi, Catherine. Hi, Bob. Hi, Jean. So I got a question, like on the UDC, right? When you do a development in a community, you got to look at things like how many residential homes, OPI, RMF, restaurants, stores, bars, gas stations, supermarket, everything that serves a community needs. Well, if you didn't have that, and like you were just talking about, I think it was section 124, if you didn't have any of these regulations, people would just do the highest and best use, and we'd end up with 40 hotels and no restaurants to serve the community. So how can Anderson's staff, how can staff even ask BCC to open up the UDC for Bob? I haven't seen a traffic study. I haven't seen how his will not affect the neighboring property's daylight plane. I haven't seen how his water is environmentally friendly to dump into the Grand Canal. So I don't even think he meets the criteria to ask the BCC to open up the UDC.
So are you asking, are they waiving criteria to open it early? Because I do think they are opening it early out of sight.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Bob, the staff recommended to the Board of County Commissioners that they open up the UDC for the end of January for Anderson's Hotel. Yeah. And my thoughts were, wait a minute, ours is an existing use change, and we put in that request back in September. Bill Merrill sent his report in asking for it in December, and now they're opening up Bob Anderson's UDC change, which doesn't even meet the criteria to open the UDC change, because obviously he affects traffic intensity because he doesn't have existing use. He also affects the neighboring properties with their daylight plane. And if you don't meet those criteria to ask for a special exemption, staff isn't even allowed to recommend it to the Board of County Commissioners. So I guess my question is, how can they ask the Board of Commissioners to open up the UDC if Anderson's property does not meet the criteria to do so? Because he's not 35 feet and he's dumping his water into the Grand Canal. They haven't done a traffic study. So how can they even ask the Board of County Commissioners to open it up?
That's a really good question. I think, I don't know if anyone else has a response to it besides myself, but I think that is a question. And when we saw that it was on the agenda for January 26th in the evening, it took us by surprise because we did not have advisement from them earlier this year that this would be happening so quickly. I'm not sure what the urgency is. Excuse me. Yeah, I think that, right, the Stickney Point Hotel, I believe, is who is actually asking for the early opening. The only thing that I've noted is that they have been working on this project, I believe, with some staff assistance over the last 2 years, and they exceeded the cycle time, meaning it took too long. They haven't really done anything, so maybe now they're wanting to move on it. And I'm not sure if that exempts them from some parts of this or not, but I believe they have had a workshop. I believe Bob Anderson's group has not had a workshop yet.
I'm just confused how staff could work on it for 2 years when it clearly says that you have to meet certain criteria, not affect your neighbors, not affect intensity. There's no traffic study. Obviously, if it's taller than the neighboring building, it affects the neighbor. Boom, right there alone, the staff shouldn't be allowed to work on it without direction from the Board of County Commissioners.
I believe that's what the request is, not to actually consider the project in front of the county commissioners, but rather to get permission from the county commissioners to direct the staff to develop some more information. I don't believe it would be to make a decision about the hotel.
No, it is. But in order to ask to make that request of the county commissioners, you have to meet certain criteria. They don't meet the criteria to even ask.
So if they don't, then maybe it's premature, is what you're saying, and we should ask them for delay, which we can do. I don't know if that's a criteria to ask for the delay, but I'm willing to ask.
If Bob's building was existing transient and he had a traffic study. First, it's kind of like the whole, reminds me of the big pass dredging. They have to do a traffic study. They have to do impact to the beaches, impact to restaurants, all these things. Their water going into the Grand Canal. They got to have a study for that. They have to show that their height alone wouldn't, no matter what, their height alone would, I don't believe, would allow them to ask to open the UDC, because that's a special exception, not a special exception to SCOD, but special exception to the Universal Development Code, the long range plan.
Hi, may I interject here a second?
Sure.
I don't have my little hand to raise my hand on the screen anymore. I don't know what happened, but
Maribel, is that right?
yeah, it's Maribel. Hi, how are you?
Hi.
I mean, my suggestion is, why are they doing it? Is because they've gotten away with doing it before. There's all these requirements of things that people are supposed to do, and as somebody just mentioned, this other project got away with doing things without doing all the things that are required either by code, or I didn't hear exactly what the requirements are. But if we keep letting people do this and get heard and get assistance from whoever is helping them out on these things, then they're going to keep doing it. So, I mean, I'm an attorney. I would think the first thing that the association should do is submit a formal letter on behalf of the association and its members, telling them what the requirements are and that they're not fulfilling it, and they shouldn't even be having these meetings with them and helping them out till they meet them. And then if we wanted to, we could file injunctions against them for doing these things and not following the requirements. But they're going to keep doing it if they get away with it.
Catherine,
That's my advice. Is
Okay, so that sounded really good. So the closure is to come back again and ask them, is that what you're saying? Suggesting that we go back to the commissioners and state?
yeah, going back to the commissioner with the letter from the association saying that they shouldn't even be having these, I don't know the terminology, the meetings or what they're having right now, and that they shouldn't even be helping these private citizens on commercial ventures when they're not even meeting their obligations under the codes. And, if they, and then we can consider, if you wanted to move for an injunction to prevent them, but, they obviously have some motivation for allowing these things to go forward. I'm not going to venture to guess what it is. I have my own theories, but they're going to keep doing it unless somebody calls them on it.
Well, and part of what happens before a hotel can be considered is they do have to meet all these criteria, and they have to have staff input to answer a lot of questions about how they do meet those and what would be considerations for the county commissioners. And I believe this is a first request to ask them to open it for discussion. And I'm with you, Maribel. I'd like to see more information available to the public about where they do stand. And I'm not sure why there's a formal permission at this point for the staff to work on it if they have had staff assistance on an ongoing basis as needed. I really don't know the answers to that. So those are all good questions, and we should check it out and consider writing something. I would support that.
I also had a suggestion on the hotels that not only should they consider all the applicants together in existing hotels, but I would also bring up that there's already all these so-called private residences springing up around Siesta Key that when you see them advertised on VRBO or Expedia, they can sleep 20 plus people. Those aren't private residences. They weren't built to be. They're 3 floors high, and they're really mini hotels. So we shouldn't even be taking into account the formal hotels on Siesta Key. We should be taking into account all those mini hotels that are being advertised on all these rental sites and submit as exhibits copies from VRBO, Expedia, and every other site showing all the things that are proliferating, because it's not just the numbers that you think are going to be here. It's much more than that.
Correct, Maribel.
I can maybe give a quick response that Sergeant Smith told me. He didn't mention this when he was on, but he told me that they have a larger number of calls, and there's actually not because we have an increase in permanent residents. So that tells you something. No. Yeah. We have a lot of temporary transient people here for longer periods, and that should give us some leverage to talk about what's happening on the key. Thank you so much, Maribel.
Okay, thank you.
I think
Catherine, can I just make one point?
Yes, Jim.
Okay. First of all, I agree totally with what everybody's been saying here about the hotels and so forth. But at the session that's coming up on Monday, why wouldn't it make sense to ask the question, how did they get the approval to be at this stage? To bring it up on Monday and be rather forceful in the sense of saying, we really don't understand why this is happening, and you know, on what basis did the BOCC allow this to happen. The other comment I would make about the transportation modeling, Catherine's aware of this, some other people may not. Anybody who listened to the second session for the Ask Gary Hotel, in both of the meetings, the first and the second, I raised the issue of the transportation, the traffic problems enormous traffic problems that incrementally would occur at that corner if anything like this were to happen. And I asked specifically whether or not they had carried out a transportation impact analysis, and they claimed that they had. Now, if you just think about that for a second, if they've really carried out something a meaningful analysis, and I would just say that I'm not comfortable at all that anything of quality work was done because, for example, up at Avenue B and C, even FDOT just did an approval of that light, which we're fighting. We can talk more about that at some other time. But their analysis said that they could put a light in B and C and the traffic wouldn't back up to 41, quote unquote. So just imagine what's really, I mean, it's just bullshit work. I mean, I've never seen anything like the quality of this work. It's garbage.
All right, Jim. I agree, but
Thank
that's
you,
enough.
Jim.
Okay, Franklin, you're
Yes.
on next.
Thank you. This is just a brief comment, and I know this is a topic that we've talked about before, but I'm talking now about the houses that are rented. And what I fear is a trend that is very powerful and driven by how expensive houses are and how lucrative it is to rent a house many, many times during a month. When I first moved here 8 years ago, we're on a street near the village with about 14 private homes, and there were no rentals. There are 5 of them now out of 14 houses. I have rentals on 3 sides, and they are breaking the rules. One of them may not be, but they're breaking the rules. And a friend of mine who lives on another street similar to ours across the canal has now sold his home. The noise is too great, the trash is too great, so he's leaving. And I fear what's happening, I mean, it relates in some ways to the hotel discussion. I talked to Susan Staley about this, and she's really not able to do very much. But the point is, there are a lot of people now walking up and down the street. One of the homes that's rented across the street has 12 beds in it. So this is in some ways like an infusion of hotel-like entities and large numbers of people breaking the law and an inability to do anything about it. I wonder if we might have a separate discussion, ask Susan to come in and have a separate discussion about this, because this is a trend now. This entire street could be rental houses that are breaking the rules. And we're 3 blocks from the village. The street over on the other side could be the same. And these aren't just people renting. Mostly what happens is a house comes up for sale, a company buys it knowing how lucrative the rentals are, and then they hand it over to a realtor or some other outfit to advertise. It's changing the nature of the neighborhood fundamentally, and it's populating our area with a lot of more people than I think we realize.
Well, you know, Catherine, on that, I've been trying to get a registration process for RSF homes to accompany our 30-day ordinance. County staff will not work on it unless a Board of County Commissioner directs them to work with us on that. It doesn't change the state rules. It doesn't make it harder to rent. I cannot get a county commissioner to tell David Pierce or his team to do a staff report on the registration process of RMF homes on the Barrier Island. And this is important because Susan Staley can contact Airbnb and VRBO with that signed signature of our ordinance, and they will give her the entire calendar. It's costing the county, they're losing 4 million, 3 to 4 million a year in taxes, and
That's right.
it's costing the legal guys millions.
Michael, thank you. This is a problem you and I are very familiar with, and it's much deeper than this. There are people that are homesteaded that are renting that are not supposed to. So there's a ton of things that there. You're absolutely correct. We have to do something about it. I think the hotels are first, and then we have to go after it. Okay?
Yeah, and I agree, Michael, too, that this is something we have to address, because if in fact the necessity for hotels is due to worries about the economic downturn that our country has experienced in this last 10 months, it may be taken care of if this was addressed at some point and make it a little less worrisome for the commissioners. So we'll talk about that. I think it's a good purpose. So thank you very much. And in the meantime, all of you that are looking, please take the information down that you see about what you can do. And we will have a couple of meetings coming up, and you will continue to get information on the web page. And please do seek it out. Thanks so much for all of you that are looking at this today. Thank you so much. Now I believe the next big wonderful thing that we have to talk about, that in this day we need to have great news, and I believe right now we can get it from Jean and from Phil, who've been working on the Grand Canal regeneration project. So go for it.
All right, before I start, Joyce has a question.
Oh,
Joyce? I guess she raised her hand, but she's muted.
she's muted. Yes, unfortunately. Yeah.
Joyce, you gotta unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
I can hear you now.
hear you now.
Okay, the screen you had up saying where to get information about signing up for the workshop on Monday,
Yes.
the 11th. It said the second item down on the right. It's actually the second item down on the left.
Oh, sorry, I have the wrong side. Okay.
Oh,
So
okay.
right here it should say left.
There
Or
you
on
go.
the right.
Got it. Okay. So when you go to the planner, you will see on the planning services document, there are 2 workshops going on that day. It was a little confusing at the initial, and I think several of us registered for at least 2 workshops that day, and because they both involved Kimley Horn. But we had some help from someone, one of our great people that writes so well, Rachel Hackney, who apparently reported the problem. And I believe the county then took care of it and separated the 2 workshops. It was a run-on page. So you shouldn't have any
I think it was
difficulty.
the wrong correction.
Yes, I think you're right.
Yeah,
So-
Catherine, this is Erin.
Yep.
Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes, hi, Erin.
Tom Surprise has been desperately trying to get noticed. He's been waving, and I think he's muted.
Oh, maybe so. We
So
do have
could you
to,
address Tom?
I can answer a very quick question, but I do not want to take away from the next presentation.
Okay.
We can always, unless it's something that everybody needs to hear, we can always talk another time unless he feels it's real urgent. Tom, are you still there wanting to ask a question?
But Tom's muted.
I don't
He
even
can
see, I
He
don't
has to
see his
learn how to
picture.
unmute.
Yeah.
I can't unmute him. He's got to unmute.
Oh, that's
Tom,
right.
you have to unmute
He's got to do it.
Yeah.
on the top of your screen.
Well, he can call us.
No, he's unmuted.
All right, go ahead.
You calling on Tom or are you calling on me?
You go
Tom
first.
Surprise.
Well, all right, go ahead.
Diane's trying to help him.
Okay, and it won't be, okay, go ahead, Tom.
here,
I'll
go
try to
ahead.
answer this
He's
quickly.
on.
Okay.
Meeting ended. I had done it earlier.
My guru, she wasn't available and I couldn't get hold of you. We've been talking about very quickly, you're talking about the rules and regulations for private houses, and the other thing, they limit it to so many bedrooms, and if you're above that, you have to have a different regulation, and it's 6 bedrooms, and they can't be renting to more than 6 people or something like that is down there, and the amount of people have to be a certain amount, or they go into another classification. I've got it written here somewhere. I'll have to dig it up. But when that come up, I know there's rules right in there that call it right out. The
Right, I
next,
believe we've had some folks working on it in the background. I think Michael's one, and I know Susan Staley, by the way, who is our code enforcement officer, in case you don't know who we were speaking about, who's awfully good. And it is we have a real stumbling block for enforcement, and we could do something. So I think we will take that on.
And Dean
at some
presented and I presented to the commissioners in 2015 about the problem. So
Right.
I have been gathering information all along to go forward with that.
Right, so we have that on our list of to-dos, and there's a
I'll
lot to
dig
do,
it
you
up and
guys, so
find it.
thank you. Thank you,
I'll
Tom.
look it up and find it out where it's at, the exact numbers, but I just went through it the other day. Very quickly, the other thing you've been talking about is the rules and regulations, because they're dumping so many people in here and no consideration about traffic flow or anything else. We have this meeting coming up on the 11th, and yet they asked for questions. I had 4 questions.
Can you write them down so you'll be ready to offer at least a couple of them that night? Because you'll have to ask them, not us. Yes, that'd be real
I've
important.
already
great.
submitted the 4. I've already submitted the 4 to them. But
Okay,
each
great.
one of
Would
them-
you be able to speak them yourself, you think, to them? Because I think
Yes.
that really matters.
Yes, I'll speak them. Do you
Okay.
want me to do it on behalf of the association or as a private citizen?
Well, you're with us on the board. You can name yourself as you like.
Okay, the thing is, roughly what they are, there's 4 questions.
Okay, you
Every
can,
one of them relates to the fact that nobody is doing the traffic flows or the traffic surveys. And because of that, I don't like riding slow, but I'm more concerned about fire, ambulances, medical safety, and all of that. And each one of my questions, one way or the other, almost calls out, what have they done? And what have they done to coordinate with the other 3 major hotels that also want to do the same thing, and everybody's jamming it into the pot and not doing anything about it. So
Tom, would you send your questions to me so that we can be ready for Monday and we can move on the agenda tonight, because I know we have a lot more to discuss that I
Okay.
think will be good news. But target and make sure they're written out and just send them on and we'll talk about them. That'd be great.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
Julius is next. He had a question.
This is a very quick comment to follow on to what Maribel was saying about how we got to this point, that they're able to do all these things without going through the proper procedures. And I think there's a very clear explanation for that. They have prominent land use attorneys working with the planners, with the staff. And the land use attorneys that they have, who are well connected, are actually writing a lot of these documents for staff.
Oh,
That became very clear at one of the meetings. The staff isn't writing these and the staff isn't evaluating them. The land use attorneys are writing them. And I think unless we have some way of sort of fighting fire with fire, this is just going to continue. They're able to get away with it because they have well-connected attorneys working with them. That's all I've got to say.
thank you. Yes, we have some good attorneys out there. We really do. And over the years, we've been before the County Commission on many issues, and surprisingly, and it's not to say we're just so wonderful, but sometimes it does not matter. And I hope that we have a chance to have a good option with the commissioners this time as well, and that people can have a good result. But we're gonna be ready. Thank you for your comment, though. Really appreciate it. We will be ready.